Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Menelik, and in this video, it's a reaction video. We're gonna react to one of my favorite podcasts. I like listening to this podcast, a lot of values that I get from it. And so I'm gonna react on one of the video, which is Jordan Peterson video, how to become the person you have always wanted to be. Which we're all trying to be. We're all trying to become who we want to be. So in this video, I wanted to talk about kind of like go over the video with Jordan Peterson, the mindset that he's talking about and what I get from it and what you guys can get from it. And I just wanted to tell you guys that I appreciate you. I've seen some of the growth on the channel, views, etc. So I appreciate you guys, and then let's get into it.
If you want to know something about yourself, sit on your bed one night and say, what's one thing I'm doing wrong, that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix? You meditate on that, you'll get an answer. And it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary one. When you're
just from the beginning, like I know this is like 17-second video and I'm already pausing, but the things that he's talking about kind of just remind me of the last videos I posted about the philosophy of extreme ownership, looking at yourself in the mirror and then asking yourself, what is one thing that I'm doing wrong that is stopping me to become the person who I want to become, and then go ahead and fix that thing, taking ownership of that thing, that it's my fault because I'm not doing the thing right, so I'm gonna focus on it. So yeah, I mean,
some of it's your own trapped, some of it's your own inadequacy. What you can do to begin with is every bloody thing you possibly can do to put yourself in the most virtuous and powerful negotiating position possible. Wherever I go in the world, people come up to me and they often have a pretty rough story to relate. It's an awful thing because you see, even in the revelation of their triumph, the initial depth of their despair. So I wouldn't change that, but it's not nothing. And it's certainly not just happiness. It's better than happiness, but it's almost unbearable.
Quick one, can you do me a favor if you're listening to this and hit the subscribe button, the follow button, wherever you're listening to this podcast? Thank you so much. The conversation you guys have been waiting for. I say that because of the thousands and thousands of messages I've had since I announced that Jordan Peterson, the man himself, all the way from Canada, came here to sit in my kitchen and have a conversation with me. And what a conversation it was. One of the most moving moments in the history of this podcast takes place in this conversation. And I think the thing that people love about Jordan Peterson is his unrelenting desire to just say what he believes to be true, not what he believes to be correct, not what people want to hear, not what people will be happy to hear. And it's because of that, it's because of his pursuit of truth, that he's managed to change millions and millions and millions of people's lives. That is absolutely no understatement. So without further ado, I'm Stephen Bartlett, and this is the Diary of a CEO. I hope nobody's listening, but if you are, then please keep this to yourself. First, I feel like I owe you a debt of gratitude, and I want to say thank you for the impact you've had on my life. And I'll point at the specific impact you've had on my life. And you asked me before we started recording why this podcast had been successful. One of the reasons is actually something I've gained from reading and listening to your work, and that's this real commitment to trying to be your true self and trying to be your truth. This podcast wouldn't be successful, and I wouldn't have been successful in terms of pursuing myself had I not understood the importance of truth across all facets of life and in my relationships, which was a real pivotal thing for me. And that's thanks to your work.
So what's changed in your relationships as a consequence of that?
So this is something that is interesting with Jordan Peterson. Like, well, I mean, he's a psychologist. But whenever it goes to a podcast, usually when you go on a podcast, someone interview you, right? But in this case, he always asks questions. He's always curious, like, what happened? Why did you do this? Which is interesting. It kind of like make the interview going back and forth. So input of both people. We get to learn more. And then
I believe it's really difficult to truly connect with someone if you're not speaking and being your truth. And I wasn't. I think I was wearing a mask in my relationships in the context if I didn't express how I was thinking and feeling. I was trying to be who I thought my partner wanted me to be. And at the point when I let down the mask and I started speaking my truth, actually, as I was departing from the relationship got stronger than ever before. And it was like we were never actually connected until I was being true with her, with my feelings, with what I wanted, with my life. And since then, I would categorize my relationship as being the strongest thing I've ever seen in terms of a romantic connection with someone.
And so when you were starting to talk in your relationship in a more truthful manner, what did that mean that you had to admit? I mean, you just said that part of it was a disconnect between who you were trying to be and who you really were. So that's a persona issue, right? So you think maybe, and everyone has this proclivity to some degree, is they're deeply self-conscious and uncertain. And so instead of allowing the person they're with to connect with that underlying uncertainty and inadequacy, they act out a persona.
Yeah.
And then the problem is that, well, perhaps the person falls in love with that persona, but there's no real connection there. It's an artifice. And, having said that, one of the things that Carl Jung, the great psychotherapist, said about a persona is, don't be thinking that you're better off if you never formed one. So for Jung, it was a voyage from, say, undifferentiated self in infancy and so forth, through persona to authenticity. Because you have to act out your ideals to some degree, right? And you also have to formulate a avatar of yourself in some sense that's a mediator between you and other people in casual social encounters. Like, you don't want to walk into the bank and have the teller tell you about his or her day when you say, "How are you doing?" Right? I mean, now and then that can happen, but generally it's too much intimacy too quickly. And so you need this functional shell. But the problem arises when that functional shell is all that there is. And then the real person underneath is just desperate and unhappy because nothing of what's being acted out reflects a true underlying reality.
This is interesting though. It kind of reminds me of I don't know if it's a quote by someone saying that the world is a stage and we're all just player in it, meaning that we all wear a certain type of mask because we have different persona depending on where we are, who we are with, and the things that we are doing. We adapt a different persona at work maybe because we are being professional. So if you are someone who giggle, joke too much, you may not probably do that at work, right? You try to be more professional, depending on the places that you go, the people that you meet. If you meet someone for the first time, the first impression may be different compared to someone that you are already used to, someone that is around, that knows you to the deep core of yourself. And I think this is something that a lot of like young people like me and also young people that are growing up, we deal with a lot in terms of like once you get in your teen, like you are trying to like be in relationship or connect with someone other than you, and someone from the opposite sex. It's tricky because at the beginning you know that sometimes even there are stuff about yourself that you don't like, so you are telling you in yourself that in your mind that person may not like that part of me, so I'm gonna try to like compensate and build on it, and which you kind of like erase your true self and then just project something that person like. It's not the real you, right? Because if you're gonna go be in a relationship with someone for a long time, that person got to like the real you compared to the persona that you're projecting. But it's kind of like good. I wouldn't say good and bad. It's kind of like, depending on how you use it, it can be good and bad as well. Because in order for you to become that person that you want to become, you need to act in the ways that person in the future is acting. So it's like, okay, I want to, so it's like, if you are trying to be your best version of yourself And the best version of yourself is productive, goes to work, is disciplined, etc. You in the present, you have to adapt that persona. If you are someone who is lazy, you're going to adapt the persona of someone who is productive, right? You start cleaning stuff, you start having a to-do list. You are kind of like creating a new persona of yourself, a new mask, so that you adapt into it to that extent to be better, right? Or at work, like I said. So it's an interesting one.
It's the long-term consequence.
I think in the book Power, it talked about the same thing. We all think stuff that we don't usually say, and we learn that since we were kids, right? There are stuff that you may be thinking, but you don't say. You are not always projecting your true self to everybody that you meet, right? In some situation, you don't have to. In some situation, you don't have to project yourself, because it's like, it is just for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, etc. And then you just move on top of stuff. So, that's very much what he's saying. I think it's like, it's a balance. You kind of need it, and then you kind of don't want to overdo with the mask, because you got to be yourself. You got to be yourself with the people that you love and people that are around you all the time. You cannot wear a mask all the time unless you want to destroy yourself mentally or emotionally.
What is the consequence, the long-term consequence of acting? So many people, especially because of the world I live in Instagram and social media, we kind of build out these personas, and then we almost follow the implicit instructions that come with those personas.
Well, that's the problem right there, is that, that I'm trying to get a hold of the Disney people at the moment, because I want to do a lecture series on Pinocchio, because I think Pinocchio is a brilliant work of art. And if you're a puppet and an actor, and Pinocchio is both at times in that movie, both a puppet and an actor. So why an actor? Like, why is there something wrong with being an actor? Well, the first question is, who sets your role? And then the second question is, who's pulling your strings? So you've put on this front that is there to make you popular and sexy and desirable, and to mask from yourself your own inadequacies. But that's a role. Well, who wrote it? And for what purpose? And so Jung said, for example, that we all acted out a myth, and whether we knew it or not. And, maybe you're acting out a tragedy. Maybe you're acting out Narcissus. You don't know, because you've put that on yourself in an attempt, in some ways, to deliver to people what they want, or more accurately, to look as though you're delivering to people what they want. And it's not nothing to do that, right? Because at least you're attempting, in some sense, to adapt to the social world. Someone who's really infantile and dependent, someone who's never left home, part of their problem is that they haven't crafted a persona. So you don't want to denigrate it entirely, but it's no substitute for the real thing. And it turns out that not only is what we want from each other the real thing, but that's also the adventure of your life. And so if you aren't truthful, and that means, unfortunately, especially at the beginning when you start to be truthful, it means deeply coming to terms with your inadequacies in humility. So it's very painful. Without that, you don't have the adventure of your life. You have the role that you've acquiesced to. And that'll take all the meaning out of your life.
The adventure of your life. You say, imagine who you could be, and then...
Well, what you just said kind of like hit me, like especially like social media and stuff, Facebook. I mean, I think the three worst are Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. Those three, because that's where we craft that person of ourselves. Most of the thing that we put out there is like, the good part of us, right? It's like, look at me, I got this, look at my clothes, do pictures and all those kind of stuff. And it forces us to kind of like present a face that usually probably is not us, right? You depending on what you post, you sometimes don't post it for yourself most of the time. And I mean, personally, I've, kind of struggled with that kind of stuff for a while. And, it's just, like I said, it's just like a journey of life. Through the journey of life, you get to find yourself. And then once you are truthful to, because one of the things about like being truthful is like you have to start by being truthful to yourself first before to everybody else, right? And by coming down and accepting yourself as you are, and then focusing on the things that you can control to make better about yourself, it helps you, it gives you that peace of mind, that mindfulness where you're always in peace. Like, I don't give a fuck what someone else is thinking about me. I know what are the good qualities that I have. I know what are the bad qualities that I have. I don't mind the bad quality anymore because it's just part of me. It is who I am. Who cares, right? And if the people that I want in my social circle are gonna be people that accept those good quality as they are and those bad quality as they are. That I am not gonna play to a persona or to act a certain way just for someone to like me, because that's kind of like, it's mess you up, like I remember like the time, you get in like, I don't know, 16, 17, 18, you start chasing girls, etc., and you start getting like those rejection. Now you are like, okay, what are the tips to like, okay, talk to a girl, make her like me, and all those things. How should I dress? In a way, it pushes you to get better, etc. But also, sometimes we craft a whole person of someone that we are not, right? Like for me, I remember I used to be, mostly introverted. Still, I like doing stuff by myself. I like my own time. But when we were doing that, it's like, oh, you got to go out to meet the girls. You got to, go to parties, etc., etc. So we crafted that persona of ourselves, personally, of myself, to kind of like just get those things, right? You get the chance to grow, but also over time you realize you will learn what you like and what you don't, right? Over time you get some priority. There are things that matter, there are things that don't. So yeah, I mean, it started good. We're just 8 minutes in, but we started good.
At that. I encounter these young people who appear to know who they could be, or they've imagined who they could be, but for whatever reason, they seem to choose the certain misery of their current situation, the job that's sucking their soul out, or that relationship, over the uncertainty they'll encounter as they go on the adventure of their life. So what would I say to these young people who always say to me, Steve, I want to do this, but you can see them stifled by fear, because it's like...
Yeah, well, it's like, make a plan, man. So when I was doing my clinical work, which I did a lot of career work with my clients, both at a beginner level, I would say, like really a beginner level, with people who had no employment whatsoever, no history of employment, who were undereducated and who lacked every skill you could possibly imagine. So these were people who were really in dire straits, up to people who were operating at the top of their profession, but who could still strategize forward. And so, for example, let's say you're at a dead end in your job. Okay, so I don't find my work meaningful. All right, so that's a problem statement. It's like, well, why not? I find the work I do repetitive and boring and without spirit. I have a bad relationship or a neutral relationship with my boss who doesn't know who I am. I have problems with coworkers. All of that needs to be differentiated, right, and analyzed in detail. So we might say, for example, let's say you believe that you're undervalued at work, and maybe you are. What you need to do is you have something to say, and we would have to figure out what it is that you have to say. But it would be some variant of, I'm bringing more value to the table than I am being compensated for, and that's demoralizing me. And it's also not good for you being my boss, because if I'm actually more valuable than is being recognized, then the fact that you're not valuing me properly means that I will become demoralized, I won't work properly, and you won't get the best out of me. So it's bad for both of us. And if your boss is in principle not amenable to such a discussion, then what you should seriously consider doing is finding another job. Okay, so let's say we're going to set you up for this. Okay, this isn't like next week's enterprise, man. This is your life. So the first thing I would ask is, well, do you have your resume or CV in order? Well, I haven't typed it up for 3 years. Well, what do you think about bringing it up? Well, I'm pretty nervous about that because there's some holes in it. And, I didn't do so well in college and I'm kind of embarrassed about my resume. It's like, okay, bring it in. Let's go through it. Let's at least update it. Let's look where the holes are. Let's look at where the inadequacies are as far as you're concerned, right? This isn't my judgment. It's your judgment. Let's walk through those judgments and see if they're warranted, because maybe you're just too guilty and ashamed and self-conscious and anxious, and you're looking at your resume more critically than someone else would. And maybe there's some holes that you need to rectify. You were 2 courses away from your BA and you dropped out or something like that. Well, maybe we need 6 months to address that. And at least, even if you can't be fully educated, you could be taking some courses online. And so when you went to a new job interview and they said, what about this hole? You'd say, well, I came to terms with that 6 months ago, and in an effort to rectify it, I'm taking the following courses, and here's my plan for completion. That's a really good answer. And anyone with any sense who's interviewing will accept that as an indication that although you're not perfect, and who is, that you have a good plan and that you've thought it through. Like, that's the kind of answer that in all likelihood will cement your candidacy for the position. Okay, so now you're going to go to your boss. Well, you have to have your CV and your resume in order, and you have to be able to stand on it solidly, and which at least means that you're prepared to address the inadequacies in a credible, realistic, believable, and truthful manner. All right, now what you do is apply for like 10 jobs. You don't have to take them, but maybe you have to go to an interview or 2 or 3 or 4, and maybe there's a bunch of opportunities out there for you that you didn't even know about. And maybe someone offers you a job. And so now you can go to your boss and say, here's the situation I'm in here at work. Here's my evaluation of the problems in relationship to me. Here's what I could do for you if you gave me a 40% raise and the opportunity to progress, but I'd like to see a plan for that. And I've been looking for other opportunities before conducting this discussion, and I have some. Well, then, if your boss treats you with contempt at that point and doesn't listen, then perhaps he or she is a little more narcissistic than might be optimal, and it's time to find a new job. But this isn't something you do trivially. And so when you're doubtful, say you're trapped, you ask yourself, well, why am I trapped? And that's a hard question, right? Because some of it's your own inadequacy, a lot of it. And all of the part of it that you can deal with is your own inadequacy. So even if it's unfair, even if you're hemmed in for any number of reasons, inappropriate, like ethnically predicated oppression, let's say, or maybe you're in a workplace that really is sexist in some fundamental sense. Well, that's not good. It's not just. It's not fair. It's not meritorious. All of those things. And maybe you shouldn't be there. But what you can do to begin with is every bloody thing you possibly can do to put yourself in the most virtuous and powerful negotiating position possible. And you have to think like a snake in some sense to do that. You got to get the details right. You have to be prepared to bite, and you have to have your eyes on the prize, so to speak. And people aren't taught this sort of thing ever, really. They're not taught how to negotiate. They're not taught how to goal set. They're not taught how to conceptualize appropriate success in some broad sense. In some sense, that's what the humanities are supposed to teach people. So,
on that point of understanding my inadequacies or someone's inadequacies, I really believe that it's really difficult to undergo self-development if you don't have self-awareness. And I was really trying to understand from your writings how someone is to build their self-awareness. It's almost like the unknown unknown. If you don't have it, how do you build the thing?
Well, I know a good exercise for that. It's like a prayer in some sense. In fact, I would say it's proper prayer.
I think there are a couple of things that I take from this specifically, which is just the idea of, first of all, the thing that you talk about is really related to the idea of extreme ownership, the philosophy of the Stoics, the idea that even though, let's say everything is unfair, let's say we're at the disadvantage, let's say everything is going wrong, in those situations, can we find comfort in the things that we can do? We can still call the injustice or fairness, but can we focus on the things that are under our control and take ourselves to get to another level, toward a better version of ourselves? And in the simple case where if you feel stuck in your life, if you're stuck, no job, you can't see a future, can we start by planning and taking care of our own shit, right? Putting our life in order the ways that we need to, plan and focus on owning ourselves, the things that we can do. If you don't have a job, but you focus on your resume, doing the job search, etc. The other part of getting accepted, getting the job, etc., those are not under your control. You will go to the interviews. There are a couple of things that you have under your control. You can make your resume as good as possible. You can learn about how to present yourself better at the resume. You can learn about how to communicate better, negotiate better. Those are things that are under your control. The other part, sure, is not under your control, but can we just put a little bit more chance on our side, more opportunity by leveling up our own inadequacy, the things that we're not good at, right? And that kind of when I was listening to what he was saying, kind of brought in the idea of those soft skills that are not being taught at school or through education, that we have to go out of our way to find it out, right? And I think one of the places that you can go to find those soft skills is through books, because you can find books on a lot of these things I was talking about, books on negotiation, books on how to talk, talk clearly, properly, articulately. You can find book on how to, present yourself better, how to carry yourself, right? And then, or how to level up your mindset, etc. Those are things that we can learn through books and on our free time. And that's why I keep hammering on the idea of we do have a limited amount of time, but because of where we are in society right now, we tend to spend it on a lot of useless stuff and then we complain later, right? Instead of using the little times that we have. Maybe you are someone who work and you do have a little bit of time. If you really don't want to be in that position 5 years down the road, what are the times that you can use to move on to the next level? Can you spare a little time to grab some books, learn some things that you can use in the future, etc. So, that's what I get from.
You want to know something about yourself, sit on your bed one night and say to yourself, you got to mean this. You got to be desperate. This is no game, this. It's my life is not everything I want it to be, and perhaps it's not everything that I need it to be. And by need, I mean my life is so unbearable that the suffering that's attendant upon that is make me nihilistic, cynical, bitter, resentful, homicidal, genocidal, unable to have a good relationship, prone to punish people for their virtues because of my jealousy, driving the proclivity to see evil everywhere except within my own heart. These are problems, man. And you ask yourself, you sit on the bed and say, okay, man, I'm ready to learn something. What's one thing I'm doing wrong that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix? It's you meditate on that, you'll get an answer. And it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary one. And it's often something that will point you to small things. So Carl Jung said, people in the modern world don't see God because they don't look low enough. And so imagine you're in your messy bedroom, and you're sitting on the edge of the bed trying to have an honest dialogue with yourself. And the little voice says, it's pretty disgusting in here. And you think, well, I'm way above such trivial niceties as organizing my room. It's well, that's pride. That's arrogance. If you're above organizing what's actually yours, how in the world are you ever going to organize anything else? And so you get on your knees and you think, well, it's time to, take a brush to the toilet. And maybe that's where you start. And that works. That works. You start making those micro improvements, like real micro improvements, real on the ground, actual micro improvements to things that are wrong, you'll improve unbelievably rapidly.
What you're talking about there sounds to me a lot like an overdose of arrogance and also the need for humility. Do you think the Western world suffers from arrogance because of our relative privilege and luxury that we kind of overlook?
Of course, well, that's a temptation, right? I mean, when the radical lefty types go after people for their unearned privilege, they have a point. Now, the point is, the existentialists called it thrownness, which is that's a Heideggerian term. And thrownness is the fact that we kind of experience life as if we're tossed into it, thrown into it. You're male and not female. You're Hindu and not Christian. You're tall and not short. You have an arbitrary range of talents and an arbitrary range of limitations, none of which, in some sense, you chose. It's the cards you're dealt. Now, some of those are cards of privilege. Maybe you're born intelligent. Maybe you're born symmetrical. Maybe you're born healthy. Maybe you're born into a culture where it's much easier not to be absolutely deprived. Maybe your parents are rich. And so all of that, in some sense, is unearned. Now, along with that comes a good dose of existential guilt. Because at the same time, and this is true for anyone, regardless of their cultural background, the ground we walk on is soaked in the blood of historical atrocity. And so that's on you because, people think, well, who's the Nazi? Well, it's the fascist, or who's the radical communist? It's the radical left-wing ideologue. And the fundamental truth of the matter is that's best dealt with as a spiritual matter, is the adversary is within, really, most profoundly. And so you have to take the responsibility for that historical atrocity onto yourself. I was talking to Guy Ritchie this week about his movie King Arthur. It's quite an interesting movie in many ways. And when Arthur, who could be the hero, takes the sword, he's so overcome by visions of his murderous uncle that he can't pick up the weapon. Well, think about that. You have weapons at your disposal, but they've been used by your murderous uncle. How dare you wield them? And the answer is, maybe it's easy just to leave the sword on the ground because you do want to be responsible for atrocities going forward. And don't think you couldn't be. And don't think you might not enjoy it. And so the way you pay for your privilege is with your virtue. I mean that most particularly. You have these opportunities and this existential guilt. And the way you expiate that and atone is by doing your best to live the best possible life you can manage, to speak the truth, to treat people with respect, to abide by the principles of the dignity of the individual, and to put your house in order. And that's how you pay for your unearned privilege. All of us. And we all have our privileges and our curses, All of us have that. That's why it's not useful to be envious of people. You're a young man, you see someone drive by in a Ferrari with a blonde, and you think, my God, he's got everything. And, the woman in the car is a prostitute who's got a cocaine addiction, and her life is just one catastrophe after another. And he's had to lie and cheat his way into this position, and he's afraid that everything's going to come crashing down on him, and that's what you're jealous of. And it's just not that profound. You don't want someone else's fate. Man, your fate's enough, and your adventure's enough. It's plenty. It's more than you can ever fully realize. And so that's also part of the reason that we all believe that the individual has some intrinsic dignity. It's don't be so sure that your position and your room is so damn trivial. It might be your attitude towards it that's trivial. And if you're in dire straits and dire circumstances, just look at how much opportunity you have to make things better. So, not that it's easy. You don't even want it to be easy.
Real quick, I just want to go back on the things I was talking about. It was saying about privileges. It's true. We all have some kind of privileges that, in some way, you may feel guilty about it. Privileges of where you are, of your lack opportunity, because you know that there are some people that may need that to be in that position, but they just didn't get the chance to be in the position that you are in. And by reminding yourself of those privileges, it reminds you to be humble, to not take it for granted, and want to do something great with it, pushing yourself further that you can be and trying to be that best version of yourself, right? You know, like the places that I'm in right now, that's a privilege, right? And I don't want to take it for granted. I want to use it to get better. And by that, not just better for me, better in a sense that if I can push it forward, I can use that privileges that turn into something good, that opportunity that turn into something good to help someone else that is coming behind. And with that, you want to try to live your life to the best, right? Be respectful of others, be humble, right? It's not always about you being on the top, right? Through humility, you learn. Through humility, you connect with other people. Through generosity, those are values that we don't talk about enough. I realize that most of the time when we talk about success, money and all this kind of thing, we tend to glorify the egos, the dark side. I don't disagree of needing a dark side to push over the edge, because it's not going to be easy. So sometimes you need to go into that dark spot to push forward. But we also don't glorify the part where it requires you to be also generous, right? To be a good person, to have good values, to respect, right? Understanding that the position that you are in, you are likely to be in. And if you get a chance to do something good for someone else, do it, type of stuff. So what he's talking about, privileges and opportunities, I kind of can relate to it. I know that there are different kind of privileges, and I see that he's leading into the fact of like, don't be envious of someone else's life, because you never know what is going on into someone else's life. In the 38 Laws of Power, I think that's the reason this book is really powerful. It's a book that I didn't finish the book, but when I'm listening to what he's saying, like some of the stuff connects. Where I think in the book it talks about envy, which is let's see, envy. Okay, I'm pretty sure it does talk about. No, it's not in this book. It's in the Law of Human Nature, where it talks about one of the human nature, which is envy. And the advice about envy is pretty much what Jordan Peterson say, that the thing that you see from far away that you are envious of, when you get close enough, it's not as good as what you thought, right? Like, you see someone, like I said, driving a Ferrari with a blonde, nice girl. In your head, it's like, man, this guy is doing so great. Like, I envy him. I want to be like him. Like, and then, but you don't know, maybe this guy is a drug addict, right? And maybe the girl that he's with is a prostitute, right? And maybe he has to lie his way to get the money that he got, which down the road will lead to a bad stuff. And himself is not at peace with himself. So it's just this idea. It's like, sometimes we see stuff from far away and then it's shiny. It's like, they got it all, etc. The world is not fair. But when you look at it close enough, it's not as shiny or as good as you thought it is. So that's a way to like think about envy and combating your own envy. That's also books that you guys should read. The Law of Human Nature. So very good book as well.
It's more than you.
This part specifically, where it was talking about the room, I just wanted to touch a little bit about it because it's something that is, like I say, it does sound trivial. It's like, well, my room, I'll do whenever I get the time to do it. But what I personally experienced and I realized is that your environment kind of like gives you the vibe. Depending on how you structure your environment, the place that you spend most of your time in, depending on it, your action will adapt to it as well. Either if you structure your room in a way that makes you want to be more productive, like my room is kind of like a studio. I got book all around. I try to keep it as neat as possible. Whenever I enter a space of work and productivity, it makes me fix stuff. And sometimes I'm just down. I don't feel like good at all about the day, or like you get those times that you don't feel like shit. You just feel like shit. So some of the stuff that I usually do is like, I look at my room, I can see that, oh, it's dirty. I haven't cleaned it in 2 days. Let's start, fixing stuff. I've been putting stuff on my drawer, just like that. So let's start by folding my clothes and then fixing my books, fixing my stuff, dust some of the stuff, fix the bed. And then by doing that, I realize that, oh, it's peaceful. I'm present. It takes my mind away from all of the worries and all of the things that is going on in the life, and then, put it back onto the present moment, which is trivial, but it helps you cope and it helps you stay present. Type of stuff.
Point of you don't want it to be easy. I've really contended with this idea of struggle and chaos in my life and the role it plays. And once upon a time, I thought I was trying to rid my life of chaos and struggle. Mm-hmm. I thought that's why I was trying to get rich and get the Ferrari and the blonde. I thought that would create a life free of struggle. But then I looked at some studies and I heard about this thing called gold medal depression, when Olympians come back from the Olympics and they've lost orientation. And then the day when someone offered to buy my company for a nine-figure number, and it filled me with this emptiness and this dread. And I tried to understand the role that struggle would have to play for me to be a fulfilled human being for the rest of my life.
This part, I don't know about you guys, but it does really suck though, because like when I went to do the marathon, right, I spent I think 2 or 3 months just in the prep of the marathon. It become part of my daily life, from the way I eat, from the way I sleep. I run pretty much every single day, and then I went and did the marathon. And the next 2 weeks, even the next month after the marathon, it just felt so empty. Like the first day after the marathon, I did run, all this kind of stuff. But then it's like, okay, now what? I'm just feel so sluggish. I feel like it's just felt empty, So I think struggle plays a big part in it, because as we are struggling, as we are trying to make something to make our life better, or something that we are striving or working toward, we really enjoy the process compared to the medal or the accomplishment sometimes.
Play for me to be a fulfilled human being for the rest of my life.
The observation with regard to your company, that's a great observation. I mean, we're built to walk uphill. And when you reach the pinnacle of the hill, you want to stop and appreciate the vision. But the next thing you want is a higher hill in the distance, because it's the uphill climb that it's from the uphill climb that we derive our value. And I mean this technically. So almost all the positive emotion we feel, especially the emotion that fills us with enthusiasm, and that's to be filled with the Spirit of God, by the way, because that's what enthusiasm means. That's experienced in relationship to a goal. And so in some sense, and this is part of the religious enterprise, you want a goal that you can never attain, right? So you can always move closer to the goal that recedes as you move towards it. You think, well, that's frustrating. It's like Sisyphus pushing the rock uphill. But it's not, because as you pursue that goal, you put yourself together and your life does get better and richer and more abundant. And that's why the highest levels of virtue and goal are in some sense transcendent. You want them to be above everything you're doing so you can continually move towards something that's more sublime and better. That's what you are. You're here to live, not to sleep. And the problem with the vision of Mai Tais on the beach is that, well, first of all, that's a vision of drug-induced unconsciousness. Second, it's only going to work for about a week. Third, you're going to be a laughingstock in a month and depressed and aimless and goalless. It's you want a horizon of ever expanding possibility. And so it does happen to people because they've staked their soul on the attainment of an instrumental goal. And it can be a pretty high order goal. It was in your case. But then you think, well, now I'm there. Now what? Well, the answer can't be, well, I'm going to live in the lap of luxury and never have to leave the face. What do you want to be? A giant infant with a gold bottle? You never have to do anything but lay in your back and suck. It's like, well, you see the problem with that as a conceptualization. It's no, you want to be like an active warrior moving uphill with your sword in hand. And that's dynamic, that's exciting. And that's why so many young men disappear into video games. That's all acted out in the video game. So they have to act that out in their own life. Not that I despise video games, because I don't, but they're not a substitute for life. So
this is what I like listening to Jordan Peterson, because the way he breaks down stuff kind of like connect them and just make sense. Like what you say about like religion, like, you know, people chasing stuff that they can't get, in a sense, which is like God, and then the struggle is the process of, you know, religious enterprise that is getting you closer to that goal, but you're never gonna reach it, and it gives you fulfillment in the process. It's the same as, you know, doing physical challenge. Or I remember I was talking to someone, like when I was talking about the race, the marathon, someone, and he was telling me that, okay, you know, that's what rich people usually do to like signal virtue in a sense. But then when I listen to this, it makes me think about, like, you know, it's more like they're kind of like looking for different challenges and struggle to like give some meaning to their life in a way, because it's like, well, let's say we make all the money, right? We rich, don't need to work anymore, etc. What else can you do? You still want to accomplish, you still want to chase something, some kind of struggle to give meaning to your life. Personally, I know that if I'm not trying to reach some kind of like potential of myself, I'll feel depressed as hell. Like the worst thing that can happen to me is me not being able to strive for something that is better, you know, and personally, in a sense, right? So it's like, even the idea of like, okay, entrepreneurship, making money, trading, all this kind of stuff, it's never a focus of like, okay, once I get there, then I will just, you know, sit down, chill, I'll eat food, I'll just sit down in my house and not do shit. But it's more like, okay, once I get there, I'm already thinking about like, okay, once I get there, what's the next stage? And there are a lot of things that I wanted to do too as well. It's like I was saying with the marathon, right? The emptiness that came with the accomplishment. But then while I was doing it and while I was finishing up the race, I was already thinking about what is the next thing, which in my case, I wanted to do like triathlon, Ironman, and maybe one day like ultra marathon. Those are things that's like, there are more to go. Like there are more struggles, there are more challenges. And the beauty is just that through those challenges, I connect with myself more, and it's just a better version of me that's coming out of it. So, yeah.
On that point of the encouragement of the individual, we all have people in our lives that we want to encourage.
We hope.
Yeah, we hope, right? And we sometimes fall foul of trying to force our own bias, our own intention for them, on them. What is the best way? If I've got a friend in my life or a you know, partner that I want to encourage to come out of their place of despair into a better place, how do I effectively do that without overpowering them or stifling them or making them feel inadequate, which is sometimes the consequence of trying to change someone you love?
Well, example's good. But then I would say disabuse yourself of the notion that you know what is best for this person. You don't, not only do you not know, you actually don't want that responsibility for two reasons. Let's say they do what you say and something good happens to them. Well, whose victory is that? Yours or theirs? And if it's yours, did you just steal it? And then let's say they fail following your advice. Well, they pay the price for that. And you can skip away merrily and say, well, I should have spoke more carefully. It's like, you don't mess about with people's destiny. You do not know where they're headed. Now, having said that, you do what you're doing in this interview, in this podcast. You ask people questions, real questions, like, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm not doing so good today. Well, what's up? What's going on? And you can't think, well, I'm going to ask questions to lead this person in a particular direction, because that's the same game, the same instrumental game. You have to see what it is that you want to know. I see this when people ask me questions after my lectures, Now and then, or during a Q&A, now and then people get up and they'll ask a real question. It's part of the ongoing dialogue. Something struck them. They stand up. There's something they really want to know. It's an honest question. And that goes real well. But not infrequently, someone stands up with a little prepared speech that's packaged as a question. So I get this from Christian traditionalists fairly frequently. They get up and they ask me about my religious convictions, but really what they want to do is corner me into admitting that I should accept Jesus Christ as my Savior and join a particular, let's say, denomination. It's not a question. It's just a manipulation. And so your questions, like your statements, your questions should be honest. And if you ask people questions and you really listen, they will untangle themselves. And that's partly why people love to be attended to, Like, if I meet people on the street, I ask them their name. They're all usually flustered when they come up to me. They don't really want to interrupt me, and then they're flustered. And the first thing I do is shake their hand and ask them their name. And I listen, I'm not that good at remembering names, but I listen to it. And they know how to say their name. And so it kind of settles them down. And then it sort of marks them out as a person against the background, eh? And then if I pay attention to them and listen, they will tell me something in like 10 seconds that I need to know. Because they have something to say, And then if you listen, people tell you what they have to say, and then you get wise because you collect all that. And so you want to help someone. Well, first of all, you would decide that you're aiming towards help, right? And that you do that in the spirit of ignorance. This is what every good clinician learns is, I don't know where you're headed. I don't know what's wrong with you. This is a hard problem, man. It's like, what's your problem? I don't know what your problem is. So let's find that out first. And then let's find out one thing you can ask people. This is actually useful in an argument with someone you love. They're upset with you. What are your preconditions for satisfaction? Now, I wouldn't state it like that. It's like, if I could give you what you wanted right now in the context of this argument, and I wasn't doing it in a manipulative way, what is it that I would have to say or do that would in principle satisfy you? And that's a hard question, And the person might say, well, I think you should apologize and about this. And, and then I will say, what words should I use? And they'll say, well, if you loved me, you'd know. And I would say, no, I'm stupid and ignorant, and I don't know what the right words are to satisfy you. So why don't you give me a hand with that, and I'll utter them inelegantly and awkwardly in a good faith demonstration of my commitment to peace. And that won't be so good because maybe it would have been better if I came up with it myself, but maybe next time I can do slightly better. And that works. It requires the person who's after you to think through the question even of whether there's anything that could be said or done that would satisfy them. And if the answer to that is no, well, probably the relationship is over. But certainly the person that they're accusing has been put in an absolutely impossible position. But usually, almost inevitably, if the person meditates on it for a bit, there is something that would satisfy them that can be negotiated, as long as they're willing to give you the opportunity to do it, stupidly and badly. So, listening, man.
What is on relationship, and then talking about how do you yeah, and talking about how do you encourage someone to change or get out of this despair, etc. That's something that's first of all about the relationship. What he's talking about is a good way to communicate. Well, because sometimes there are arguments that we have in relationship. Usually, I mean, sometimes is we're trying to solve an issue. So by asking question and by being truthful, you get the answer, and you guys are able to move forward. But sometimes, like, what that person is looking for is not a solution to the problem, but they're just arguing because deep down it's a different issues that you guys need to solve, etc. And then it just made me think about one of the thing. I don't know if I'm just the only guy who does that, but usually we tend to have that projection, or maybe it's like someone that we may be interested in and want to date or something, or if we're just in a desperate position, we tend to, like, okay, let's say you want to choose a easy option, but you are attracted to something different. Not trying to shame anybody in this in what I'm saying, but it's like sometimes you will want to be with someone that in your mind is like, oh, okay, I like this about that person, but I don't like this, but I can just get her to like change, or to see the ways that I'm seeing so that she can change. And that's the worst way to like ever look at it, man. Like, before you even get with someone, you already have a preconception of wanting to change that person. Just forget it. Be with someone that you don't need to change that person to fit a certain description that you like, type of stuff. So that's number one. Number two, when it comes to like friends, etc., you don't want to push your ideals on someone else. You don't know what that person wants for their own life. If you ask the question and then figure out what they want, then ask for your help to get there, sure, you guys can go with that. But you pushing your own ideal to like wanting them to be a certain way, that is a bad situation to go with it as well. It's like, okay, let's say that person go along with it, and then if that change happened for the better for that person, who's that win gonna be for? Is it really for that person because that person really wanted that, or was it for you, for your own ideal? And what if it goes wrong? The person will be stuck with the consequences. You can just kind of like escape and goes away. So kind of like, yeah, I think there's that. And what else did you talk about? I think that's what I want to say.
So, listening, man. Jimmy Carr, I talked to Jimmy Carr 2 weeks ago, the famous comedian. Yeah, it was real interesting. He said comedy is the most dialogical of the entertainment forms. And I thought, well, what do you mean by that? Because you're just it's a monologue, right? Now, I do monologues, but I pay attention to the audience, right? I'm always talking to individual people in the audience and watching their reactions and listening to the audience as a whole. So even though it's a lecture, let's say, or a talk, I'm watching the audience and responding. So we're in a kind of dance. Well, Carr pointed out that comedians, before they hit the road, and this is virtually invariably the case, they have their new routines. So their corpus of potentially funny jokes. And then they do 200 shows in front of small audiences. And the audience either laughs or doesn't. And if you're listening, you collect all the jokes that people laugh at. If you do that 200 times, you have nothing but hilarious material. But you listened. And then you can go out on the road. And that was very interesting to me because humor is a mysterious phenomenon, experientially and conceptually. And it's sort of precognitive and instinctual, but it's also extremely sophisticated. And there's an element of transcendence about it, right? Because you can laugh at yourself. And that's in some sense the highest form of humor. And so it's so interesting that we can criticize and elevate ourselves at the same time, and that we find that intensely pleasurable. And so a good comedian collects ways to do that, shares them with the audience, and he's listening. And so if you want to help someone, the best way to help someone is not to give them advice, but to listen to them. So
I think that's a good spot to end the video on, which is, if you want to really help someone, you have to listen to them. You have to listen to what they're going through, what they want, what how's the problems that they are dealing with, and then giving them advice based on the things that they need, not based on what you want them to become, based off how you want to spin them or manipulate them to become a set of things that you like, but based on what they are saying to you and what you are listening, and then giving them feedbacks that can help them move forward. So this is it for the video. It was a podcast with Jordan Peterson, and then he gave some good insight about like mindset, and then talks, most of the stuff that he was saying are mostly related to growth mindsets, to stoicism, to extreme ownership, to discipline, to, you know, listening, generosity, understanding where you are in life, and having humility, giving back, living respectfully, and also understanding that wherever you are in life, you have some kind of privileges, and then remind that there are people that didn't get that chance. So if you get the chance, do something good with it. Try to be the best version of yourself. Be respectful. Live life fully. Be humble. And that's it. So I hope this video is insightful for you guys. It is for me, because every time I listen to some of those podcasts, I'm learning something. So now, because recently I didn't get enough time to like listen to podcasts myself, so I'll just be doing like reviews of podcasts and interviews, and I'm breaking down what I think is important and what I think are good mindset to take on and move forward. So before you go, I would like you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment if you get something that is valuable from the video, and then until next time, my friends, be safe and have a blessed day. Peace.